excited to have you all here. I hope you're having a great time. Hope you're getting out to see all the cars that are outside. Make sure you check out all the vendors. We have the vendors indoor here, including My Outfit Car Show Life. If you need a show board, talk to me about that. But we've got Camaro Central in there. We've got a number of folks outside like Wheelcraft. They are here from Ohio, and there's lots to see and do outside as well. So thank you for coming to Camaro Nationals and enjoying this car that we all know and love. So we want to welcome everyone to the Cross Ram and 302 Engine Seminar here at Camaro Nationals. Today's seminar will be led by Guinn and delivered in concert with special guests Jerry Thompson and Dennis Borem. Wayne is the author of Camaro Untold Stories, a collaborative work with an inside perspective, written with the help of several Chevrolet engineers and best known for its exclusive coverage of Camaro's heavy-duty service options, including the Cross Ram manifold and the 302 Z28 engine development. In addition, Wayne has been consulting with private individuals and race teams on 302 power development over the course of 50 years with Guinn's Engineering. And now I'd like to turn it over to Wayne, who will introduce his distinguished guests.
So welcome to the Mopar Nationals, everybody. I do have my special guest, Dennis Borem, and let me introduce Dennis. Dennis is the owner and head engine builder for PME, which is Pro Motor Engines in Mooresville, North Carolina. If you're not familiar with that business, it's probably the premier business, engine building business, not only nationally, but probably globally. They do power production for all of the three top NASCAR series, ARCA series, and Trans Am series as well. So that's a hell of a party to come to. So you can imagine the experience behind that. And Dennis and I, we just recently had an opportunity to collaborate, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit and talk about it. Tom Cordero, I'll introduce him as resident expert on cross rams and heavy duty service components as well. So Tom will probably interject on occasion when we bring him in. And by the way, I want this to be as interactive as possible. So at any time, if you have questions, please raise your hand, just shout it out. You know, don't feel hesitant. I want to make this, like I said, very interactive. And we have the person here who did the design work, person who can lend the most insight and legitimacy to it all. Now is the time to bust those myths wide open and have a good time on it. Before I continue on though, we're going to make a presentation. Jerry Thompson. Jerry's racing career goes back to 1964-5, around that time frame, where he raced the Yenko Stinger. So some of you may be familiar with the Yenko Stinger, which was a Corvair, and of course the association with Yenko. Think about it, I'm just going to state it this way. When I think about, if you consider the Z28 to be the legend, this is the legend that helped create that legend. So I want you to think about it while I present this, and I'm going to read the plaque. There's the Legends of Camaro Performance, presented to Jerry Thompson, Chevrolet Product Performance Engineer and Camaro Trans Am SCCA National Champion, in appreciation for his contributions to the Z28 302 engine and Cross Ram manifold. I said the Camaro Nationals and Camaro enthusiasts across the globe recognize Jerry and the Camaro Performance legend who helped develop the heart and the soul of the legendary Z28.
Who I was, what I really was doing with this. He powers things up a little bit so that you know, you have what I know about and the things I don't know anything about. So as he said, I was a Chevrolet development engineer, the engine test session at the engineering center, okay, during this time. So my job actually included looking after the small block Chevy. These were good times because I really cared about. So I did my thing and, trying to do the work. The guy who was responsible for the engine, that he owned all of the things that the small block was being used for. He would write work orders for people in a service group like us to do things for him, including. So does that make sense where I fit in the picture? So why the whole thing came about, what was the driver for this, and some of the details of getting approval for it, and of the testing that went on. I wasn't real close to the production or the marketing or stuff of it, but what was going on in the dyno, and I had done some car work. So that's kind of what I know about, and rather than just telling stories, like he said, I know you guys are really deep into this. So any questions or things that didn't make sense that I can speak to use this time to the maximum? I just take a hand for anything that it's sort of like challenge me on something. Okay, the question was, when I was these things, would I like to be out on the track with it? I guess the answer is a frog's butt watertight? No, I did get a hold of the first prototype. You're right. We weren't authorized to work on them out at the proving grounds. That was another. They had a test track right by the center there, and we had it over there a few times. The best dynamometer operator in the group had corralled into working on this. He also worked on our Corvettes in the evening, so we were kind of thick as fleas, and we had taken it over and worked with it a little bit, but that wasn't our job. We would get it calibrated, and the car test group, the thing out to Milford, Michigan, they did a lot of the work, and if like something, come back and complain on it. So we kind of work together. Get that? Okay, so the first prototype was brought down to us, and we put it on our test engine, and you could see that, man, that was flowing some air compared to the standard Z28 manifold. So, we're in good shape. When we put the carburetors on it, it ran awful. What happens, if you just hold it, is when it got real busy in here at high RPM, and you're vaporizing, but you got liquid fuel still up in the manifold moving, and the end cylinders, for the most part, were richer, and the center cylinders were starving, and so we were trying to corral some of the liquid fuel, to get it balanced up as good as we could. And a little side story that went with that, it meant a lot to me, is Norm Brown, my guy, and I are working on something, and the door to our dynamometer cell opens, and in walks Mark Donahue and Roger Penske, and Vince Piggins, who was kind of the underworld guru, because we weren't racing at the time, according to management. So, it was kind of, we were like, well, now these guys are all dead, so we can talk about this. But back then, it was on the 14th floor, they were more interested in their bonuses really than. So we were kind of like a little mafia of our own. So anyway, Mark and Roger walk in with Vince Piggins, and we had filled him in on how things are going with the horsepower thing. Well, Mark starts to look for Norm's toolbox and get wrenches and start taking this, and he wants to take it back to Reading, Pennsylvania that night. So I put up a kind of a hissy fit and said, "Hey, he can't have it." I said this, and it looked like a fight was going to break out. But anyway, Dave Martin's. I said, "Look, if you take it now and you put it on and you go out to a Trans Am, guaranteed to burn a piston. One of your center, because it's going to run lean. We've got to finish modified, and then they can air ship it to you. That's fine." And, okay, yeah. The question was, I guess, and as he pointed out, the Z28 itself was a parts bin. Yeah, and that's very true, very true. And we ever get this thing through? Well, for one thing, the V8 engine group kind of disguised it. I mean, this wasn't really publicized within GM.
Jerry, I got a quick question. Did you use the stock off-the-shelf distributor, or did you use the TI with the amplifier with your finished product?
That was like off of our Corvettes.
It was. It was.
We were.
This is a 263 off of a Corvette, put on the 68, early, some 67s with the prototype, but primarily for the 68. And the 69 uses the 267. This is a 263.
Yeah, no, that was what we run.
You ran the 263 with the amplifier in the shop, or no, when you did your test?
We had that in our race car.
Okay.
No, it was.
Or did you use the stock distributor off the shelf? Stock?
Yeah, like I say, we'd leave it a little bit loose and move it around, so we didn't care about the advancement. That seemed to work, with the
TI.
When he's saying, yeah, this was an actual test. Mark won whatever class Camaro was running in at the Sebring 12-hour. And I don't know why they did it. They sent his engine and sent it into the tech center. And Jim Travers arrived. He said, "We're going to see, this one." And I said, "You're missing the point, because knowing the dyno, when you run in an engine, no matter how the clearances you think, until the short block gets to know itself, there's just a certain power loss. A seasoned short block is where, we always kind of knew where the transient was in our engine. You got to keep track of that when you're changing parts, so you don't kid yourself. And so here's this engine that run 12 hours, and I said, that short block is sweet, because it wasn't smoking or doing anything bad. So, you got to let us take the heads off, send them to the motor room, and just do a nice, they were, a 3-angle valve job and everything. And they'll just clean them up and put them back on. And nobody wanted to do that. It's all right. You're not proving anything, then your valves will leak after you've run a 12-hour race. he had to have to be a 580 cabin to know that. So finally they agreed. So set the heads off and came back, and I said, okay, I asked, do you want to run the dynamo? No. And he stood right behind the bulletproof glass and watched it. Sure enough, he was just right there with what our engines were. And he became a believer. But a run-in short block with a fresh valve job, that's where the biggest number is.
Go ahead.
Sorry, what?
Have a hand up. The gears were you running on that car?
Actually, it was the Economy Z. It had an M20 and a 355 rear. I went through a lot of clutches.
Did you have headers on?
I did. I put whatever fit the power steering, is that hooker, whatever would go around it, and jet hot coated. I didn't have the manifolds for the car, so I did that. Put a Gardner exhaust on it. It ran best with no mufflers.
What about ignition?
I just put a magnetic pickup in the original distributor. I didn't go MSD. If I planned to get rougher with it, I was going to put an MSD with a rev limiter in it, so I didn't miss a shift. But then the car got to be worth much more. I bought it for $17,500 in the mid-90s, and then, when it was reappraised for $52 in number 2 condition, then I wouldn't dare power shift it, flat shift it anymore, because it was all original.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Oh, great, thank you so much. So what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the cross-ram design, the intention, and how to set it up for the street. As I said, Dennis and I just recently were collaborated on an engine build, and the criteria for the build was to optimize the performance for street driving. And the considerations for that, we wanted to make sure that we got the most performance over their widest range, RPM range, meaning the most torque on the low end, most power on the top end as well, but to make sure that it behaves on the street. Because I'm sure that there's folks here who have heard it doesn't play well on the street, right? And you got to use high gearing, right? All of these things. So that was the criteria by which we decided that we would, approach this build with. But the interesting thing about it is, and I want to talk about the cam specifically. So you were saying that you use a 30-30 cam, and probably it didn't use the gas as effectively as it could have. And so I'm going to ask a question to the folks here. So what cam was developed for the 302 with a cross ram? 140 cam? Anybody else? 140. All right, great, and thank you for that, because that is one of the critical things I want to talk about today. Does anybody know when the 140 cam was developed? Did it come before the cross ram? Did it come after the cross ram? So Jerry yesterday, yeah, that's right, exactly. Jerry Thompson yesterday clarified something for us, and I think it's really important for us to understand that 140 cam was the heavy-duty service component cam that completed a package that was developed prior to the cross ram. So when they calibrated or developed the cross ram, the reason that it was cataloged as such, it was never recommended as the end-all, do-all cam for the cross ram. But what it was is it just basically completed the package. So that's kind of why that it's called it a myth, if you will, that if you run a cross ram, it should only be the 140 cam. Go ahead.
I don't know the specs, but I heard it was real close to L79 cam.
Come on up, I can't hear you.
I heard it was really close to the L79 cam, the 140.
Okay. Paul was saying that it's very close to L79 cam.
I don't know the specs, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. So you're right about that. Billy Howell, who developed that cam, what he did was he based it on a big block lobe, and that was based on numbers or flow. So a theoretical, if you will, I mean, this is engine design as it was back in old school days, right? You look at it and you say, I'm looking at the numbers, it looks similar to that L79 or big block cam. So they specified it and it became the heavy duty off-road cam for general use, but not necessarily for cross ramp, right? Although it worked well, it worked better than the 30-30 cam, obviously, because it pulled more, gas in. But that's kind of what we want to go through today to kind of change maybe some thinking or maybe influence the idea that there might be a better design, right? So with that in mind, I mean, we talk about new technology and where that takes us. So the 140 cam, I'll also tell you this. It's been, at least Jerry, my experience in the past, even on the dyno, where they just flatten out because they're high lift, they're parkerized, and they tend to wear out extremely fast. So the other thing about the 140 cam is they require such high spring pressures that it wreaks havoc on the drivetrain, on the valve train, excuse me. So it's got its flaws. It was also built on 112 centers as opposed to 110. So, well, you were driving, you have the 140 cam in yours. Do you notice that, is there ever a point where it kind of just levels off and then kicks back up again?
Close to top end, yeah.
So you get about 4,200 RPM and you find that you've got a torque band which just flattens out.
Exactly.
That's very typical of that 140 cam. The reason being is it's on 112 centers as opposed to 110. So if you recreate it on 110 centers, and then if you even rollerize it, which we did, what it does is it corrects all of the RPM band is just straight up. You've got your torque curve and your horsepower curve pretty much linear all the way through. And that's really what you want, because the Cross Ram was designed for SCCA Trans Am racing. And what you want to be able to do is come out of the turn full power on. You want to make sure that you have all the torque as possible. But if you have that flat spot that you're talking about at 42, now you've got a problem coming out and just making sure you're all on. So Dennis and I, we looked at it and we worked with Hunter, it was Hunter Webb, right? Yeah. Hunter Webb from Camcraft. And so based on the numbers, and I want to talk a little bit about, so how do you get to there to understand how to optimize your cam? And I'm going to lead into it, and I want Dennis to kind of chime in as well. But essentially what it is when you think about it, you had no head work on your engine.
No.
Okay. And Paul, no head work either, right?
About 3,000 is where it worked best.
Correct. Okay. In that setup, and you did have headers, and Paul has headers too. Okay, so when you think about the Cross Ram, it was designed optimally as a package, and the package was supposed to be with a cam, whatever that means. Also, they tested against Traco heads, which were ported. So typically the 182 head, it flows about 215 at 0.5 lift on a 202 valve. But if you open it up optimally to about 247 thereabouts, kind of like a Traco build, Traco porting, it changes the dynamic and probably is the optimal point. If you go beyond that, then you're over ventilating to simplify it. And it's just you're not being able to use it. As a matter of fact, it becomes less volumetric efficient, where now you've got a reversion issue. So now you're looking at your cam once you optimize your head. So it's all of these parameters that you need to be looking at. And so when we think about optimizing it for the street, the best possible experience that you can get, now you're on your way by opening up the heads and then looking at the cam, designing the cam. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, even a rollarized cam almost picks up 30 horsepower because you don't have to overcome the spring pressures. So it's much, much more gentle on the valve train as well. So there's the old school, look at it. There's the package as you can put together from Chevrolet, but then there's this new idea of how can we make it more enjoyable on the street? Because to your point, how many clutches do you want to go through, right? Right. Well, exactly. And what gears would work best?
Probably 375 and up.
373s is probably really where you want to be, right? And so, but if you do it well, if you build it with good engine design to begin with, you're so much better off too. I'm going to turn it over to Dennis and kind of let him speak to the build that we have put together. I'm going to tell you right now that it topped out at 480. However, it's not about the top number. Even though that's a great number, it's all about how the power is distributed throughout that RPM band. So where it's usable, where it comes on. And again, I just want to emphasize, whatever your build is, it's all about understanding what your expectations are to begin with, right? If your expectations are that you want it to behave well and you want it to perform on a street to the best ability, then it opens up the conversation to say, maybe we need to think about, instead of the old school with the 140 cam, let's open up the mind a little bit and see where we can take it with new technology. So I'm going to hand it over to Dennis.
Thank you.
Yep.
I guess to start with is, if I was sitting in your shoes, why would I want to change my 302 from a flat tappet to a roller? And maybe 20 years ago, I'd have questioned that if I had one to do that. But two things is the ability to get materials to last. It is becoming more and more of a problem. And for me, building flat tappet motors in NASCAR for 25 of the 38 years or 22 years was a royal pain. I can't tell you how many late nights I put in changing camshafts, and then because the low going on a cam on the dyno on break-in, it was a crapshoot. It was you went through all these processes to make that thing live, and if you could get through the first 15 minutes, you might have a good day. And if not, you would literally you try one more, and if that didn't work, you were tearing the engine down. And as good as we thought we were, it was still always an issue with flat tapping because of the fact that we didn't have a rule to say you can only make this so much power, you can only do this. So we pushed things past their limit. You know, it's that fuse you have on the bomb. We wanted a fuse long enough to get to the checkered flag and not much longer, you know, to beat the next guy. But with what you guys are doing, you know, in the car world, you're trying to get something that you drive every day. You're not going to be wide open throttle going down the road all the time. You know, I've got one on the dyno running that wide open throttle, and that's what I'm looking at. You're going to be on the throttle, off the throttle. If you're fortunate enough to go to the drag strip or go to maybe a SCCA event, you can work on that. But for everyday driving, I would look at the roller cam or something to really look close at because of just the area under the curve. You know, you've got an engine that makes this engine. We made it. It made 480. Okay, that's a number. But can you drive it? You know, where is your RPM level? You know, you see car shows all the time. There's so much out there now, and they do a manifold test, and they gain that much on the top, right? And they lose that much on the bottom, and they're willing to take that top. And the top to them is at 6,000. Well, when you get in your car from your house to wherever you're going, and look at the percentage of the time you're going to be below 6,000, I think I know what I want with that area under the curve. So the roller really is going to get you there, and the durability of it. It's a roller. I mean, if someone was pulling me on this carpet with these shoes, there's a lot of friction. Put a set of roller skates on me and pull me.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah.
It's a lot easier.
What size compression are you running the motor in?
It's 12 to 1.
12 to 1?
Yeah.
Bored out at all?
Pardon me?
Is it bored out at all?
30 over.
30 over?
Yeah. Which is, you know, there's a little bit there, but if we're looking at the camshaft part of it, you can probably the flat tappet cam is in some ways so aggressive, but it doesn't lend itself as well to the performance drivability as a roller did. But we did that build with the mind of taking what you guys wanted, what was made, and there were a few tweaks in it to modernize it.
Yeah.
I mean, the engine is the same package. The camshaft was basically reverse engineered to a close number to that 140.
Yeah.
But the area under the curve, it's a lot smoother. You know, it's gonna burn the fuel better.
So just to expand on that, it has the same characteristics as the 140, as you would expect, but it's got that durability that Dennis is talking about, and it's just over the broadest range of RPM. It's just incredible. The difference is night and day. Night and day.
Are you still talking? Are you talking solid lifter roller or hydraulic roller?
No, it's a solid roller.
Solid.
Yeah.
Solid lifter.
Solid lifter roller. Yeah. Which you could do the same thing with the hydraulic. It's just the older engine. It's a drop-in affair, which there's probably not as many options, but that's another option there as far as if you wanted to do that. That's just a whole different thing. You know, if you're trying to stay with what a solid, it's still a solid lifter. It's going to give you the performance of the original engine. And
Which the hydraulic lifter dies after 6,000, and then your 302 is
to a point. I mean, it's got
not
a lot
good for your
better.
8,000 RPM rim.
Right.
I hate to ask, maybe I'm just not knowing, but I hate to ask, what lift are you looking at? What duration?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. What side of valves? The valves are 202, 160.
Okay, all right.
The lifter it's similar to like you probably know the Crower lifter, similar to a solid Crower, but it's BAM makes a lifter, which is an engineer that was at Crane Cams for many years. He left Crane about 10 years ago and started his own company, but it's that, and the duration. Now I have to pull up the specs in my head because I do a lot of work every day. I have to get back to it, but it's in the 230s.
He needs to put the mic
on duration.
I'll bring it over.
Yeah, yeah, and also the lobe centers on the cams. You know, I was talking to somebody here who was talking to me earlier and said he had a cam. On 106. Okay, so our short track stuff. That's what we were all about that, and a lot of overlap. It's great.
Yeah. It's gonna be a lot of maintenance though.
It is. And there's a lot more chances of reversion and other issues that you're going to get into. It's kind of going off the reservation.
It's edgy.
A little bit, yes,
Yeah.
for the cross ramp, I think. But the lobe separation there, you're not far off from that 110. You might look at a 108, 108, 109. But and the roller, like Wayne was saying, it's so much easier. In the high endurance racing world, we actually had a problem in the old days keeping the roller to live in the spring because we were over aggressive on everything. But the design of the roller and the smoothness of it, you don't have to run a ton of spring pressure. You can get away with a beehive spring, lighter valve crank.
I was just going to ask you, what are you running for springs?
Spring pressure, you can get away with 115, 120 pounds on the seat. And 350, 375. We have the ARCA series now runs it's an LS, basically an LS1, but it's a roller camshaft in it. It makes 600 horsepower, and we run 350, 360 pounds over the nose. And that thing is an endurance motor. So the technology and the advancements on the weight of the parts and the designs just. It's made it possible where 20 years ago you take a roller cam, and we still do it at some road races, and you try to put 700 pounds over the nose, because you're doing something totally different than that engine with what you guys are trying to do.
On this one, you recommend the lifters with needle bearings or bushing?
Both work well. I'm more of a bushing guy because of endurance. I do a lot of Trans Am engines. And the maintenance part of it, the bushing will wear. Needles can come apart, but I think for the application in the street, I don't know if it's worth the extra $200-300 for the set of lifters. It's it comes back to, and Wayne, we were talking about this earlier. It's like I don't know if you ever heard of Banjo Matthews. He was a car builder in NASCAR, and on the back of his trailer, because he sold parts at the end of his career, because he built cars and he raced them. But on the back of the trailer, it said speed costs money. How fast do you want to go? You know, it's you got to determine what it is you're trying to build, and plan your build around, I guess, a couple things. That's where maybe Wayne can talk about is what do you want it to do? How much power do you want it to have?
Question real quick. I'm kind of sideways, but the cross ramp, it came in the trunk of the car. To install, and it came with a 140.
Okay, the question is
this Mythbusters, Wayne?
the Mythbusters. Here we go. So the cross ram. The question is, did it come in the car from the dealer? Is that something that you could buy over the counter? Could you order it as the build sheet and it came in the trunk and that type of thing? So it was a heavy duty service component. It was not on the dealer checklist where you could actually go down and check it off. The controversy is people say, I know of a car where I saw it delivered in the trunk. You could go to a dealer and you could order the car, and then when you picked it up, they could walk it over as if you bought it over the counter, put it in your trunk, and you'd be on your way. But it was never something that there was an option that you could tick off and they would add it into the trunk. Unlike, say, like the 67, 68 Z28, where there was a package for the headers and for the special induction. So myth is busted. No, it was never available in the trunk. Only, again, if you bought it in the service area, brought it and put it in your trunk, and then drove it out, or they did it for you. But from the factory delivered, no.
There is no RPO.
There's no RPO,
And
right?
So did it come with did the engine come with the 140 cam in it with the cross ram package? No. What cam did it come with at that point?
So when you ask that, so the question, this is for the sake of the camera, because I just want to, they can't hear you, so I'm just going to reiterate. So the question is, if you bought the cross ram engine, another, so you would buy an RPO Z28, you would ask the dealer if they would install it for you, and then it's all about what you spec it out to be. You could ask them to install the cross ram on it using the 140 cam or any other cam, whatever. If they would agree to it, and most times they would not, because there's liability. And one of the reasons that they didn't want to do that is because once you drive it away, they've taken off the smog equipment. Now, if you could get a dealer to agree to keep the smog equipment on and the cast iron manifolds, and I want to talk about this in a moment too, because I see this very often either in shows or either in photographs and books. You see a cross ram with the cast iron manifolds and smog equipment. Doesn't make sense, right? It works against itself, right? Because if you think about the cross ram being a tuned system, that's really what it was. So we talked a little bit about the heads, a little bit about the manifold, how the volume was determined. You want to make sure that you have an adequate cam to run in there. And then when you constrain it with a cast iron head or exhaust manifold, it works against what you're trying to do. But I want to explain, I think I have an answer for it. Back in Car Life 1969, there was an article, and Chevrolet pushed out for that article a very special car. The car was a 69 Z28. It was yellow interior, beautiful car. And it came out with cross ram, JL8, fiberglass hood, cast iron manifolds, and smog pump. And it was supposed to be set up for a test. Well, the reason that they set it up that way is because legally, corporate wouldn't let them push it out for an article without the smog equipment. That's it. That's your answer. Now, people look at that and they say, wow, that must be right. So that's really the genesis of, at least in my estimation, why you see it sometimes. Because, you know, in some ways you have the purist who wants to have all of those components on there, but they love that cross ram, so they want to put it on, right? So it's like, you got a mixture of things going on. How well can it work? And there's nothing right or wrong. It's just a matter of what you expect out of it. I mean, we were just talking about that. What your goals are with it.
Going to what the goals are, how does the cross ram work in a drag set?
So the cross ram on the drag, so interesting.
Versus the Trans Am.
It was developed for Trans Am work, basically as a torque box. It was one of the things that it did very well, and contrary to what a lot of people think, the torque on the low end, it was a torque box and it really pulled out in the turns. But it had to be set up correctly. It had to have the right gearing, obviously, and you had the right cam. And Jerry was kind enough yesterday to say, no, the 140 cam was probably not the right cam. It was just a generalized cam that they put together to complete the package, right? But in drag racing, it has potential. But is it competitive against something maybe like a single 4 that's set up specifically for that? Maybe with a larger CFM carburetor? It's probably not competitive on the drag strip. But they did have magazine articles, setting it up on the drag strip. And then I think the article also had it out on a road course too. So it kind of satisfied both.
What kind of red line are they looking for on the drag strip?
What kind of red line on the drag strip?
Like 6,500 to 7,000 RPM?
So you were saying red line to launch or shift?
Shift, both. I guess launch would be different than shifting, obviously. But I'm just curious how much of the high end of the motor is being used.
I don't really have an answer for you. I'm a road racer. So, does anybody else have experience drag racing with the 302 with cross ram? It's a great question.
Yeah, you would think with the amount of volume that's flowing, at the higher RPMs, it's just going to be needing more power. There's more power. I would guess. I don't know. I'm a big black eye. This is kind of new to me.
And again, it goes back to engine design, right? How you set up your engine is all going to determine your gearing, your camshafts, and all of that, your flow. It's right, exactly. We're going to wind up now.
I think we need to wind it up here.
All right, we'll give it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate you being here and for your fabulous display and your knowledge on the subject of the Cross Ram, the 302.
Where is this outside?
Right here, they go right, I'm right, swap me here, and the woods right at the same time.
Well, let me just follow you over.